Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're tackling a feeling that's, well, it's incredibly common, but also deeply frustrating. That feeling of being completely stuck. You know, you, our listener, you're smart, you're curious. You've probably put in the work, right? Chasing healing, focusing on positivity.
Yeah, you've done the workshops, read the books.
Exactly. And yet, maybe you still feel kind of fragmented, caught in the same old cycles you thought you'd left behind. There's just this ache almost where you feel your real self should be.
And that feeling, that persistence of being stuck, our sources today suggest it often comes from really misunderstanding what needs.
How so?
Well, we're often taught the goal is to fix ourselves or become good by chopping off the parts that feel dark or mess comfortably.
Right, the difficult bits.
Exactly. But the truth might be that the stagnation actually comes from running away, running from a truth that feels, well, too heavy to hold. Something buried, kept silent, instead of being brought into the light, integrated.
Okay, so it's not about getting rid of parts, but bringing them in. And our guide for this deep dive is Carl Jung. His whole psychological framework offers really a pretty radical shift here.
It really does.
The mission, as Jung saw it, isn't about just optimizing your life or, feeling a bit better for a while. His focus was, honestly, ruthlessly on becoming whole.
Wholeness, that's the key word.
And wholeness, crucially, requires integration, not avoiding stuff. So we're going to explore the tools he gave us to stop feeling so fragmented and maybe reclaim some of that energy that's locked away.
Because Jung really got that you can't evolve just by chasing the light. That doesn't work. It just creates, a bigger contrast, a bigger shadow. But to become whole, you actually have to walk through the dark. You have to realize the things you buried, those parts of you that felt unsafe or unlovable, maybe even shameful, they weren't actually there just to hurt.
They had a purpose.
An essential purpose. They were parts of you waiting, sometimes for decades, just to be seen, acknowledged, ready to help you become the complete, resilient person you were actually meant to be all along.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our journey, it seems, has to start in the basement of the psyche, with maybe the most famous and definitely the most feared Jungian concept, the shadow.
Right. The shadow. And first things first, we really need to clear up what it is, because there's this common idea.
Like a demon on your shoulder.
Exactly. People think it's some mystical, external evil force, but it's not. In Jungian terms, the shadow is strictly a psychological concept. It's basically the sum total of everything you as an individual have pushed away, repressed, denied within yourself.
So it's the parts of me I pretend aren't there.
Precisely. It's the psychic landfill for everything you don't want to own.
I love the visual Jung used for this. He said, everyone carries a shadow. And here's the kicker. And the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is.
That's powerful.
It means it's not static, right?
Yes.
It actually grows the more we ignore it, like this hidden structure being built inside us, brick by brick, out of pure denial.
And the construction starts really early. Think about growing up, how we get socialized. A kid shows, say, intense anger.
Tantrum in the supermarket. Yeah.
Right. And they get punished, maybe shamed, maybe just ignored. Or maybe a kid is wildly creative, messy, unconventional.
And gets told to stop dreaming, be realistic, get a proper job.
Exactly. In those moments, big or small, the child learns a really simple survival-based lesson. Okay, this part of me, this anger, this wildness, hence feeling it's not safe to show. Not if I want to be accepted, loved, kept safe.
So you kind of tuck it away. You build up this other acceptable front, the persona, which we'll get to.
You have to navigate the world.
But the cost is huge. You basically become a stranger to huge chunks of your own energy.
Yeah.
You start believing you're only the polite, agreeable, good parts.
Well, the denied parts, the shadow parts, they're just gathering strength down there in the unconscious, waiting.
And, it's worth mentioning, Jung talked about not just our personal shadow, right? But also a collective one.
Absolutely. That's a crucial distinction. Personal shadow is the stuff specifically rejected. Maybe you learned early on that being lazy was unacceptable, so you deny your own rest. Or maybe impatience was shamed, so you repress any.
Okay, that's personal.
But the collective shadow, that's the stuff that your whole society, your culture, or maybe just your family decided was unacceptable. Think about things like intense ambition as unfeminine, or vulnerability being.
The big cultural should.
We internalize those big shouldn'ts too. And we banish those traits into our own personal shadow just as quickly as we banish the stuff we decided was bad.
Okay, hold on. I want to push on this a bit. Based on the source, are we really saying the shadow isn't just like a dumpster for the bad stuff? Anger, selfishness, fear, laziness?
No, not at all.
The sources seem to insist that our brilliance, our potential, our creativity, our power that gets locked away too.
Absolutely. And this is where Jung's framework gets really mind-bending and honestly hopeful.
How so?
Anything that didn't fit the neat, acceptable mold of your persona, the mask you show the world, got exiled. So yeah, your rage went down there. But maybe also your fierce independence, your incredible disruptive creativity, your capacity to say a really strong no, your deep drive and ambition.
Wow. So those things rock the boat with parents or teachers or later bosses.
They got shoved into the shadow right alongside your insecurities and your perceived weakness. The huge paradox here, and it's central to Jung's work, is that the very power you need to live a full, authentic life is often hidden exactly where you in the dark scared.
Which leads us to that core Jungian law the sources really hammer home. What you resist persists.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't just vanish.
If this psychic energy, this power, this emotion is denied a conscious place, it doesn't just evaporate.
No way. It festers.
Yeah.
And then it finds a way to act itself out unconscious. It becomes what Jung called an invisible puppet.
Pulling the strings from behind the curtain.
Exactly. It possesses you in a psychological sense. If you run from your deep need for rest and stillness because you think it's lazy,
you collapse from burnout or get mysteriously sick.
Right. If you run from your vulnerability because you think it's weak,
you become cold, maybe controlling, unable to connect deeply.
You end up becoming or being perceived as the very thing you spent your whole life trying not. Your shadow starts dictating your reactions, your choices, your relationship, and you look at the mess and call it fate or bad luck.
Why does this always happen to me?
When really you're living a life defined by the fear of your shadow, rather than the conscious choices of your whole self, your ego integrated with that shadow.
Let's make this really concrete with those examples from the sources. They're so powerful. Take the classic nice guy.
Oh, yeah. Everyone knows.
On the surface, he's the definition of agreeable, right? Self-sacrificing, always helpful, never rocks the boat. The perfect friend, colleague, partner.
Textbook persona. But psychologically, what's happening underneath? His shadow is accumulating just massive amounts of suppressed rage, resentment, frustration.
From years of never saying no, never setting a boundary, never asking for what he needs.
Exactly, because doing any of that would violate his core identity, his persona of, I am the nice guy. He's terrified of conflict, terrified of disapproval. So the shadow, which holds all that exiled assertiveness, that legitimate anger, it just builds and builds until...
it explodes.
Right. He lashes out, often disproportionately, usually at the people closest to him. He says or does things that genuinely shock him, things he believes he's incapable of.
And the first thing he says afterwards, that sources point out, is usually, that wasn't me.
Yes. But the Jungian perspective is crucial here. It was him. It was the suppressed, unintegrated, starving part of him that finally hijacked the ship because the conscious nice guy captain couldn't hold the pressure back.
And then comes the shame, the confusion.
Which just makes him double down harder on the nice guy mask.
Yeah.
Pushing the shadow even deeper, starting the whole destructive cycle all over again. It's tragic.
Okay, let's look at another one. The perfection, the person who's always achieving, always striving, relentlessly pushing for that unattainable goal. We'd often see that as pure ambition, something to admire.
We do. Society rewards. But if we look through a Jungian lens using the sources, we often see the engine driving that relentless behavior isn't actually joy or passion, it's terror.
Terror.
Terror of being seen as flawed, as inadequate, as ordinary. There's often a deep, deep shadow of shame hiding beneath the polish. The perfectionism isn't really about achieving excellence.
It's about running from the feeling of not being good enough.
Precisely. They're driven by the fear of that buried shame being exposed. They're constantly trying to outrun it to prove it wrong through external validation.
And the terrible irony the sources highlight is that because that core wound, that shadow belief, hasn't been faced and integrated.
No achievement is ever enough. The goalposts just keep moving. The shadow whispers, still not perfect, still might fail. It ensures they stay fragmented, perpetually chasing an external ideal that can never ever provide the internal security and self-accept they act.
Wow, that really reframed achievement-oriented culture.
It does. And the core lesson from both these examples and from Jung's whole concept of the shadow is really clear. Integration has to start the moment we stop judging our own darkness as inherently bad.
It's not the enemy.
It's not the enemy to be vanquished. It's a vital, necessary part of your whole psychological self that got left behind when you went chasing the social life. And now it's calling you back home, asking to be seen, asking to be included so you can finally complete the picture of who you are.
Okay, so if the shadow is everything we hide, refuse to see, then the persona is kind of the flip side, isn't it? Right. Everything we selectively choose to show the world.
Exactly. It's the curated, controlled, acceptable mask we wear. And the name itself, perfect, right? Persona, from the Latin for the mask's acronym.
Yeah, to signal their character.
And we do the same. We put on our professional mask, our parent mask, our good friend mask.
Now, the sources are quick to point out, we shouldn't just immediately dismiss the persona as, fake or bad, right? It serves a purpose.
Oh, absolutely. It's a necessary tool for survival in a complex social world. We need roles. We need these social interfaces.
Otherwise, every trip to the grocery store would be an existential crisis.
Pretty much. It allows us to function, to interact predictably, to navigate different environments without having a meltdown. It provides structure.
Okay, so it's necessary. But where does this useful tool become?
Yeah.
Well, a trap, a destructive identity cage.
It gets dangerous, really, when the individual forgets there's anything behind, when they start to believe the mask.
When the role takes over.
Yeah. Jung warned about this specifically. He described the persona as that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one. That's the critical point. You start identifying completely with the performance.
And there's a trade-off happening there, isn't there?
A huge one. You're essentially trading your genuine, messy, contradictory wholeness for guaranteed social approval, or at least what you hope will be guaranteed approval. Your identity shifts from being authentic to performing acceptability.
And this connects directly back to the shadow, doesn't it? You called them twins earlier?
Twins in opposition. They have this inverse relationship, like light and shadow. The brighter, more polished, more rigidly perfect your persona mask is,
the darker and denser the shadow it casts behind it.
Exact. Because everything that contradicts the mask has to be repressed even more fierce. So if your persona is the always strong, always capable, always happy one,
then vulnerability, doubt, sadness, needing help, all that gets shoved immediately into the shadow. They become these shameful ghosts you can't even admit to yourself, let alone anyone else.
It becomes unthinkable to be anything but.
God, that sounds, just thinking about the energy required. If you're constantly maintaining this facade, policing yourself, what's the psychic cost?
The cost is immense. Profound psychic energy. Think about it. It requires constant vigilance. You're always monitoring your words, your actions, even your spontaneous reaction to make sure they align with...
Like being an actor on stage 24/7.
Pretty much. And this sustained performance, it inevitably leads to feeling disconnected, hollow, burned out, emotionally numb sometimes, because the real you, with all its textures and colors, is sealed away. You're running on the fumes of external validation, not your own internal vitality.
Let's look at that example of the overconfident. We all know this type. Always dominant, super decisive, radiates this air of like untouchable authority. That's the persona in action.
Absolutely. Peak persona performance. But if that leader is operating purely from that mask, without connection to their deeper self, what's likely going on underneath? Often, yeah. Deep down, they're probably terrified of being wrong, terrified of being exposed as not knowing it, terrified of losing control. That terror, that insecurity, that's their shadow.
So the external confidence isn't real inner security. It's a defense against the shadow fear.
Precisely. It's driven by the fear of their suppressed inadequacy which forces them to double down on the dominant, making the mask even thicker, more impenetrable. And ironically, that actually diminishes their capacity for true leadership, which requires vulnerability, empathy, the ability to admit mistakes.
Okay, what about a different kind of persona? Maybe quieter, often more sympathetic, the people pleaser. The person who's built this incredibly gentle, supportive, agreeable facade that, everyone loves.
Yes. The sweetheart, the one who never complained. They likely constructed that persona because they learned, probably very early, that love and acceptance felt conditional. They had to be earned through constant agreeableness, through suppressing their own.
The fear of conflict or rejection is just too big.
It feels existentially threatening. So they never express a genuine need, never say no, never cause a ripple. But beneath that lovely, helpful facade, the psychic cost is enormous. The sources talk about a hidden storm of resentment, rage, and exhaustion.
Because they're silently starving themselves.
Exactly. Their forced kindness becomes... And eventually, the quiet death of their own needs starts to poison their relationships, their health, their sense of self. They feel used, unseen, but trapped in the role they...
The sources really emphasize this point. The persona works. You can get the approval, the validation, sometimes for years, until suddenly it just doesn't.
Right? The hollowness becomes unbearable, or the suppressed energy erupts. The body or the mind simply cannot sustain the performance any longer. There's a break.
The cracking point.
Yes. Maybe it's a major failure getting fired from the job that defined your successful persona. Maybe it's a health crisis that shatters the always strong mask. Maybe a profound loss breaks through the always happy facade. Something happens that shatters the illusion.
And the feeling in that moment must be terrifying. Pure panic.
Existential terror. Because the question screams, who am I without this role? If I'm not the successful one, the strong one, the nice one, who am I? I have no identity left. That loss of definition feels like death.
But the sources say that crack, that falling apart, it's actually the beginning of something else.
It's the first breath of freedom. It's incredibly painful, yes. But it's also the signal that the old self, the false self, the persona you identified with is dying, and that death is necessary for the true whole self to finally emerge from behind the mask.
So if the persona is necessary to some degree, we can't just destroy it entirely.
What's the way forward then? Integration again.
Integration through conscious awareness. That's the key. The goal isn't to shatter the mask and walk around raw and exposed all the time. It's not functional.
The goal is to stop identifying with the mask, to know deep down that the role is not, we need to learn to differentiate. Okay, this is the role I play at work, this is how I need to behave in this specific context, from this is who I fundamentally am underneath that role.
So the mask becomes, the sources say clothes you wear, not your skin.
Exactly. You learn to consciously put on the appropriate clothes for the situation, but you never forget the real body underneath. You can move in and out of roles with awareness, with choice, no longer lost in them, but knowing they're just temporary functions.
And the energy. What happens to all that energy that was used to maintain the lie, the performance?
It's freed up. That's the incredible payoff. All that psychic energy that was tied up in vigilance, in repression, in performance anxiety, it becomes available for actual living, for creativity, for connection, for pursuing what genuinely matters to your deeper self. You get your energy back.
Okay, so we've got the denied parts of the shadow, and we've got the controlled performance. We show the world the persona, and that gap between them, that's where we feel fragmented, stuck, maybe even fake.
That's the disconnect.
We know the unconscious mind is down there, holding all the buried truth, the shadow stuff, the real feelings. But how do we actually hear it? It's not like it sends emails, right?
No, definitely not. But this is where Jung's work on the unconscious is so vital. You can't actually silence it completely. You can ignore it, sure, but only at your own peril.
Because it finds ways to speak anyway.
It absolutely does. It's the deeper layer of your mind, the repository of everything you've forgotten, every emotion you feel, every potential you didn't dare explore. And this is why that Jung quote is just so chillingly accurate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Wow. Say that again?
Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life.
So if you keep seeing the same patterns playing out, the same kind of relationship failures, the same career self-sabotage, the same irrational anxieties popping up,
chances are incredibly high that the unconscious is running the show from behind the scenes. It's trying to get your attention about something unresolved.
And the clearest, maybe the most direct line of communication the unconscious has with the conscious mind, according to Jung anyway, is through our dreams.
Yes, dreams are fundamental. They are not just random neurological noise, not just processing the day's events. Jung saw them as symbols, clues, the language of the soul, trying to bridge the gap between your everyday ego and your deeper self.
But they speak in code, right? Not literally.
Exactly. They speak in metaphor, in images, in feeling. A house in a dream often represents your psyche, its condition, hidden rooms, A feeling of overwhelming darkness might symbolize the unintegrated shadow.
What about being chased?
Very common. If you're constantly being chased in your dreams, it's almost a guarantee you are running from some truth, some feeling, some aspect of your shadow that you desperately need to turn around and face in your waking life. The dream is showing you the dynamic. You're fleeing something internal.
We often dismiss nightmares, though, don't we? Just, I eat cheese before bed, or I'm stressed. But the sources seem to give them much more weight.
Much more. Jung saw nightmares as often being the loudest calls for they're painful, yes, terrifying, but the pain is significant. It's the unconscious using intense emotional energy to try and break through the conscious mind's defenses, the repression that's been holding something important down.
So they're not just bad dreams, they're invitations.
Brutal, but sacred invitations. That's a great way to. They invite you, sometimes force you, to look directly at the unintegrated fear, the unprocessed anger, the past trauma that your conscious mind has decided is dangerous, too painful to touch. The intensity of the nightmare reflects the intensity of the energy that needs.
Okay, so dreams are a major channel, but the unconscious doesn't just talk while we're asleep. It leaks out during the day too, right?
Constantly. In subtle ways, and sometimes not so subtle ways. Think about Freudian slips of the tongue where you accidentally say something revealing, or sudden, irrational bursts of emotion, anger, or sadness that seems way out of proportion to the trigger, or finding yourself engaging in odd, self-sabotaging behaviors you can't quite blame.
Those are all leaks from the unconscious.
They can be, yes. But perhaps the most persistent, powerful, and often damaging way the unconscious leaks into waking life is through projection.
Projection. We hear that term a lot. What does it mean in this Jungian context?
It's the classic psychological defense mechanism. Essentially, you unconsciously take qualities, feelings, or thoughts that belong to you, usually ones you find unaccept self, shadow material, and you attribute them to another person or group out there in the world.
Why? Why do we do that?
because it feels infinitely safer. It's much easier psychologically to see a painful or shameful part of yourself out there in someone else than it is to acknowledge it in here within your own psyche. It allows you to maintain your conscious self-image.
It's a way of splitting things off.
Exactly. Psychologists call it splitting. The world gets divided into good people, like me and my friends, and bad people, those others. And guess what? Those bad people conveniently seem to possess all the negative traits, the arrogance, the laziness, the anger that you secretly fear or despise in yourself but have pushed into your shadow.
Okay, so give me an example. If I find myself just intensely irritated, like disproportionately angry about the arrogance of a particular colleague, that's a clue.
It's potentially a massive clue. The intensity of your emotional reaction is the key indicator. A mild dislike is one thing, but intense consuming hatred or judgment, that often signals projection.
So what might it be projecting?
Well, the sources suggest that intense anger at someone else's arrogance could very well be a reflection of your own denied desire to be seen, to be admired, maybe even to wield power or influence desires you were taught were selfish, inappropriate, too much.
Wow. Because I can't bear that arrogant part in myself, I project it onto them.
Which then allows you to righteously judge them, attack them, feel superior to them, instead of doing the really difficult, uncomfortable inner work of acknowledging and integrating your own ambition, your own desire for rest in a healthy way.
That honestly reframes so many conflicts. Workplace drama, family fight. We think we're fighting an external enemy.
But very often we're actually fighting a disowned part of ourselves that someone else innocently mirroring back to us. They become the screen for our own inner movie.
Okay, and there's another huge way the unconscious breaks through, according to the sources, addiction.
Yes, this is crucial. Whether it's addiction to substances or process addictions like constant work, gambling, shopping, or even endless screen time. Jungian psychology often views addiction not primarily as a search for pleasure,
But as
a search for escape from the self, escape from the pain of the unintegrated part.
So the addiction is like a coping mechanism for the fragmentation.
Precisely. It acts like a psychic painkiller. It numbs the anxiety, the emptiness, the dread that arises from the parts of the self that have been split off and denied. You numb the anxiety because you refuse to face the underlying fear of inadequacy. You overwork because you've internalized the belief that your worth depends entirely on constant external validation, covering up a shadow feeling of worth.
So the addiction isn't the core problem.
It's almost never the core problem. It's the most visible, often loudest symptom. It's signaling desperately that there's a part of your soul, a part of your psyche that is starving, screaming to be seen, to be heard, to be integrated. Dealing with the addiction requires facing what you're running from.
Hey, this is a lot. If we, as a listener, want to actually start listening to this language of the soul, the dreams, the projections, the leaks, what's the practical toolkit? How do we begin?
The practice starts with radical attention, and it requires commitment, not just idle curiosity. It takes courage. First, and this is classic Jungian advice, start a dream journal.
Right away.
Immediately upon waking. Before you even get out of bed, if possible, write down everything you remember, even if just a single image, a weird feeling, a snippet of conversation. Don't worry about it making sense.
Why immediately?
Because dreams fade incredibly fast once the conscious mind fully wakes up. The more you pay attention, the more you signal to your unconscious that you're actually listening. And often, the more you listen, the more clearly and frequently the unconscious will speak through dreams. Just observe the patterns, the recurring symbols, the feelings over time. Don't jump to interpretations right away. Just gather the
dream journal. What about those waking leaks? The irrational fears, the sudden intense reaction.
Pay forensic attention to them. Especially the irrational fears, the ones that paralyze you but don't seem connected to any real, objective, external. Jung suggested these fears often act like threats.
Guarding.
Exact. Guarding the gates to your own locked up. For example, if you have a crippling terror of public speaking, even though you know rationally you won't die, that fear might be guarding your suppressed power to articulate your truth, to influence others, to command attention. The fear is sitting right on top of the potential.
So the way through isn't to avoid the fear.
No. The way through is always into and through the fear, not around it. You have to gently, consciously approach the thing that scares you. And the same goes for those intense project, notice them, question them. And that leads to the final crucial practice.
Which is?
Looking inward, always bringing it back. As Jung famously put it, who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside? The answers aren't out there and blaming others or circumstance. The path to wholeness always leads back inside.
Okay, so we've established the shadow isn't the enemy. It's more like the curriculum.
Exactly. It holds the lessons we need to learn for wholeness.
And the unconscious, our deeper self, will just keep serving us the same lesson, maybe in different forms, different relationships, different jobs, until we finally get the message, until we hear it.
It's incredibly persistent because the drive towards wholeness is innate.
Which suggests the whole past really begins with one incredibly difficult, maybe the most difficult step. Radical honesty, especially with our refusing to keep lying about what we feel, what we fear, what we desire, what parts of us we've disowned.
That honesty is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite for integration, which is the goal. Integration is the conscious process of becoming complete, of reclaiming those split-off parts.
And it's not about fixing them.
No, it's not about fixing or even necessarily liking them initially. It's about acceptance. It's about being able to finally say to those dark, scary, messy parts of yourself, okay, I see you. I hear you. You belong here too. You're part of the whole picture.
The sources have that really moving line. The parts of you that are hardest to love are the ones that need it the most.
That really captures it. Because those parts were exiled out of fear or pain. They need compassion, not more judgment.
So integration means accepting I can be, fierce and gentle, ambitious, sometimes lazy, wounded, and also wise. It's holding the contradictions instead of trying to force myself into one box.
That's precisely it. You stop fighting the inherent paradoxes of being human. And when you do that, when you consciously integrate these disowned parts, something amazing happens.
What's that?
They stop controlling you from the shadows. They lose their compulsive power over you because they're no longer repressed. Instead, their energy becomes available to your conscious awareness, to your ego.
So the energy that was locked in the shadow,
or tied up in maintaining the persona, it's suddenly freed up. Available for conscious choice, for creativity, for building the life you actually want, rather than just reacting unconsciously. True healing, true wholeness, doesn't happen when you finally scrub yourself perfect. It happens when you can finally accept the dirt, the darkness, the complexity, as an essential part of your fundamental.
Okay, let's get really practical. Shadow work. That's the term often used. What are the actual mechanics? We mentioned shadow journaling. How do you do that effectively? How do you get past just writing down surface stuff?
Shadow journaling has to be uncomfortable. If it feels easy, you're probably not digging deep enough. It requires ruthless honesty and self-compassion because you're going into scary territory.
So specific questions.
Yes, very specific, sometimes unsettling questions. Things like, what am I most afraid to feel right now? What emotion do I consistently avoid? What trait in other people drives me absolutely crazy with judgment or anger? That's a projection. What part of myself do I desperately hope nobody ever sees? What secrets am I keeping, even from myself?
That's intense.
It is. And here's a really provocative one from the sources, designed to bypass the ego's defenses. If I were guaranteed to face no consequences, no judgment, no punishment for 24 hours, what dark thoughts, impulses, or desires might I act?
Whoa.
The answer isn't about actually doing those things. It's about revealing the deeply repressed desires, aggressions, or needs that are locked in the shadow and screaming for conscious attention, usually because they were shamed or forbidden early on. They need to be acknowledged, understood, and integrated, not just kept locked away.
Okay. And what about when we catch ourselves in that projection moment, that intense reaction to someone else? How do we work with that in real time?
That intense emotional reaction, the sudden rage, the overwhelming disgust, the consuming envy, that's the alarm bell, that's your signal. The moment you feel it spike, the practice stop, pause, breathe, and then turn the spotlight. Ask yourself, okay, where does this quality live in me? When have I been this? Or perhaps more subtly, when do I secretly wish I could be but don't allow me?
So you have to consciously take the projection back, own it.
You have to reel it back in, recognize the other person is just activating something already inside you. They're the trigger, not the fundamental cause of your reaction. And this is where therapy can be incredibly helpful, by the way.
As a safe space to do.
Exactly. A good therapist acts like a mirror, reflecting back those avoided parts, those projections, without flinching, without judgment. They provide a safe container where you can finally look at the stuff you've been terrified your own.
Okay, so integration is this ongoing work of reclaiming the shadow, becoming aware of the persona. Where does individuation fit in? It sounds like the ultimate goal, maybe. How is it different from integration?
That's a great question because they're related but distinct. Integration is more about reconciling the known internal conflicts primarily between the conscious ego, the shadow, and the persona, bringing those major split-off parts into conscious relationship.
Okay, making peace internally.
Right. Individuation, however, is the larger overarching lifelong process. It's the journey of becoming the totality of who you are uniquely meant to be. It involves realizing your specific individual potential, shedding the layers of collective conditioning and false selves you were trained to adopt, and aligning your outer life, your work, your relationships, how you spend your time with your deepest, authentic inner truth.
It sounds huge and lifelong.
It is. It's the slow, often painful unfolding of the true self over the course of a whole. It's not a weekend workshop project.
And this is where we really hit that price becoming real you mentioned earlier. If your entire life, your job, your marriage, your friendships were built around, say, that perfectionist persona that kept the shame hidden,
then becoming authentic, integrating that shame, letting go of the need for external perfection. That means the old structures might crumble.
you might have to change careers and relationships.
You might. The sources are very clear about it. Individuation is not self-improvement in the superficial sense of adding skills or becoming better. It's about becoming fundamentally more. And because our society often rewards conformity and persona performance, not deep authenticity, the path requires sitting with enormous uncertain grief.
Grief for the old self.
Grief for the familiar identity, grief for the approval you might lose. You may lose friends who only related to your mask. You might feel profoundly alienated from your previous career identity. You might find yourself feeling quite alone for people. You have to be willing, as Jung suggested, to kind of fall apart, to let the old false structures dissolve so that the true self can finally be born from the he was blunt. There is no coming to consciousness without.
That's a hard truth. But there's a reward, isn't there? You mentioned the paradox of power, that the stuff we buried isn't just weakness.
Not at all. That's the magnificent, hopeful twist in all of this deep, hard work. The psychic resources you buried in the shadow because they felt too dangerous, too intense, too unacceptable. They weren't just liability. They were wells of incredible vitality, power, and potential just waiting to be consciously accessed.
So the shadow holds our unlived life.
In many ways, yes, your unlived potential. Once you face, feel, understand, and integrate the energy contained within those repressed emotions, that energy transforms. It becomes available as conscious power.
Can you give examples of that transformation?
Sure. Think about rage. Destructive, suppressed rage is terrifying, but inside that rage is the blueprint for your fear, clear boundaries, your ability to say no and protect.
Okay, what about sad?
Deep, avoided sadness or grief. Once felt and integrated, inside that is your capacity for profound compassion, for connecting deeply with the suffering of others and yourself. Your sensitivity becomes a strength, not a liability.
And fear. The thing we run.
The fear you've been running from your whole life. Once you turn and face it, feel it without letting it paralyze. Inside that fear, true courage isn't the it's acting despite the fear because you've integrated. Your assertiveness lives inside your repressed anger. Your empathy lives inside your avoided sorrow. Your courage lives inside your acknowledged.
But none of this power, none of this potential is actually available to you until you do the work, until you face the source, feel it, understand its origins, and consciously integrate it into the whole of who you are.
Exactly. You can't access the strength without acknowledging. And the end result of this whole demanding Jungian process, facing the shadow, seeing through the persona, listening to the unconscious, integrating the pieces, the end result is the most valuable kind of freedom there is.
Not freedom from problems.
No. Life will always have challenge. It's the profound freedom of no longer being unconscious. Ruled by old shame you didn't even know was there, ruled by the fear of judgment, ruled by external expectations or collective norm. You stop being a prisoner, a victim of your past conditioning and unconscious patterns.
You become
the author, the conscious author of your own life. You know what drives you, the light and the dark, and you can choose how to navigate the world from a place of wholeness. And that, ultimately, is the incredible privilege Jung's work offers us all. The privilege of a lifetime. #TechTro.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to take in, but incredibly powerful. So what does this all mean? Let's try and boil it down. This journey, Jung maps out through the shadow, learning to see behind the persona mask, listening to the unconscious, and aiming for integration and eventual individual. This seems like the essential, maybe unavoidable work of becoming a mature, whole human being.
It really is presented that way, not as optional self-help, but as the fundamental task of the second half of life, psychological.
And maybe the most hopeful takeaway is this. If you, listening right now, feel like you're broken, falling apart, or crumbling, maybe don't view that solely as a disaster.
Right. It might actually be a sign, a painful sign, but a sign nonetheless.
That the old, fragmented, persona-driven version of you is dying.
And the more complete, more conscious, more authentic version of you is finally starting to emerge. The breakdown precedes the break.
But it hinges on our willingness to engage.
Absolutely. And the profound difficulty often isn't even the integration work itself. That's just the necessary, sometimes messy labor. The hardest part, the point where most people turn back, is that initial choice.
To.
The radical refusal to running, to stop blaming your boss, your partner, your childhood, the world, for the patterns repeating in your life. To finally turn around, take responsibility for your own psyche, and consciously choose to face what you have been systematically avoiding within yourself.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought to maybe mull over. Take a look at that persistent problem in your life. The one you keep framing as an external enemy. Maybe it's that demanding boss, that overwhelming fear, occurring bad luck. Ask yourself, just entertain the possibility. What if that perceived enemy isn't entirely external? What if it's also in part a disowned piece, a messenger from your own shadow, for you to finally finally recognize